The gift bag was simple cream with a satin ribbon. Inside handmade napkins, I'd embroidered myself ivory linen with stitched florals, just like my mother taught me. I thought Isla would smile. I thought, even if just for a second she'd look at me and see the woman who made her childhood magical birthday banners, pressed dresses, warm apricot scones. But when she opened the door, she didn't smile. "Oh, Mom, you came," she said, voice tight. I stepped inside, careful not to track sand from the walkway. The room was already full glassware, clinking pale pink roses on every table, a woman in a white pantsuit giving directions to the florist in the back. All eyes flicked toward me, and then quickly away, like I'd spilled something invisible. Isla barely let me set the gift on the table before touching my elbow. "Can we talk for a sec?" We stepped into the hallway. She looked tired, but polished, neutral lips, sleek bun. And then I saw them, hanging delicately from her ears, the pearl drops. My mother's. I had loaned them to Isla for her college formal, promising they'd be hers one day. "You didn't have to come," she started, almost kind. "I was invited," I said quietly. She hesitated. "Actually, no. You weren't. We're going for a modern, elegant vibe. Intimate, streamlined. It's about the aesthetic, Mom. You know how aesthetics matter." I blinked. "So I don't fit. I just mean you have a presence. People notice. And sometimes that's not on theme." She didn't say I embarrassed her. She didn't have to. Behind her, someone laughed, clinking champagne. I looked down at my outfit. Gray slacks, white blouse, pearl buttons. Appropriate. Safe. Still not enough. I walked back to the table, picked up the gift, and left. She didn't follow. And when I reached the car, I realized my hands weren't shaking. They'd been still the whole time. I drove home in silence, only the soft crinkle of ribbon in the seat beside me. And when I opened my front door, the first thing I saw was the old chest in the corner, the one holding everything they thought they still owned. I didn't turn on any lights when I stepped back into the house. Just walked into the living room, set the gift bag down, and stared at the old walnut chest that had sat in the corner since Isla was a toddler. She used to sit on top of it, like it was a throne, her jelly-stained hands clapping for imaginary crowds. I knelt beside it, eased it open, and reached for the drawer beneath the baseboard. Silent, hidden. It opened like muscle memory. Inside, ivory combs from my great-aunt. A lace tablecloth from my grandmother's wedding. Gloves from 1936 preserved in parchment. The last time I took them out was to show Isla when she was 15. She'd said, "They're so vintage. I want to wear them at my wedding one day." I never promised in writing, but I promised. I ran my fingers over each item like they were wounds. Then I took them out one by one, cleaned them gently with cloth and care. The gloves still smelled faintly of lilac sachets. The tablecloth had a tea stain on one corner, mine from 1988, when I spilled while wrapping it for safe storage. I left it. By evening, I had 5 boxes laid out neatly on the dining table, each labeled with the item and year. No emotion, no attachments, just facts. I opened my laptop. The bookmarked contact page of Leona's Antiques waited an old acquaintance from a local historical society. She once told me, "If you ever part with those gloves, call me first." I typed the message carefully. "Hi, Leona. I'm parting with a few heirlooms we discussed years ago. Ivory combs, a 1930s glove set, embroidered linens. Excellent condition. Let me know if you're still interested." I hovered over the send button, then clicked. No hesitation. Not today. The email vanished. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the quiet weight of the boxes, each one a chapter Isla never asked to read, only to inherit. Upstairs in my closet, there was one more thing they hadn't asked about. And that was going to be the first to go. Are you counting down the days? Marcy asked over coffee, her eyes bright. Weddings are such a whirlwind, I bet you're beside yourself. I smiled the way you do when someone says something kind and clueless. She stirred sugar into her drink completely, unaware she'd sliced me open with cheerful words. No date's been confirmed, I replied, folding my napkin tighter than necessary. That's Isla for you. Marcy laughed, so private about everything. Still, I saw her Pinterest board stunning. Vintage lace-pressed florals, lots of soft whites, totally heirloom themed. I felt my throat tighten. Heirloom? She nodded, sipping casually. Yes, it's like her tagline was literally a legacy affair. She giggled. Sounds very... You doesn't it? I didn't answer. Just nodded and excused myself to the restroom, where I stared at my reflection and pressed the edge of my thumb into my palm, until the sting gave me something else to focus on. Legacy. She'd taken my mother's pearls. But I wasn't on the guest list. Not even a text. A week earlier, I'd seen Grant outside the hardware store, all pressed collar and quick smile. Larissa, he'd said, his voice syrupy. Still driving that Buick, huh? You're charmingly quaint. Quaint. Like doilies. Like a hand-cranked radio. Like something admired but not invited. I wonder when Isla started echoing him. When she decided my presence was off-brand. Too textured, maybe. Not glossy enough. I drove home in silence. At a red light, I opened my calendar, the one with her name still penciled in under bridal shower. I erased it slowly. The space looked oddly clean. At home, my inbox chimed. Leona. Subject RE interested. Body absolutely. Can you send photos? Especially of the gloves. I already have a buyer in mind. I replied with photos. Then stood up and walked into the bedroom. The jewelry box on my dresser hadn't been touched in years. But tonight, it would be. Leona arrived right on time, wearing neutral tones, and that professional smile that told me she knew not to ask questions. She stepped inside, took one look at the boxes I'd stacked by the front door, and exhaled like she'd stumbled into treasure. These, she said softly, lifting the gloves with reverent fingers, are exquisite. And these tablecloths, real threadwork like this doesn't exist anymore. I nodded, letting her speak. It wasn't a performance, it was a transaction. She took her time sorting laying pieces out on my dining table, like relics from a bygone era. When she opened the case with the ivory combs, she gasped. I'll double your estimate, she said without looking at me. I reached for the manila envelope she'd placed on the table earlier. The paperwork was simple, a transfer of ownership. No fanfare, no debate. I signed with a steady hand. As she packed everything carefully, tissue paper between each layer, soft cloth wraps for the jewelry, I excused myself for a moment. In my bedroom, I opened the velvet-lined drawer one last time. Nestled in the corner was the silver lily brooch. It had belonged to my grandmother, and later to my mother. Isla never asked about it. Maybe she didn't know it existed. I held it in my palm for a moment, then pinned it to my cardigan. When Leona left, she didn't linger. Just handed me a check and thanked me for trusting her. The house was quiet again. I brewed coffee not for comfort, but for punctuation. I made it strong and black, sat at the table with one hand around the warm mug and the other resting beside the check. There was no speech, no raised glass. Just me and a moment that tasted like finality. I opened my phone, tapped out a message, and hit send before I could overthink it. You'll want to double-check with the photographer about the vintage details. Plans may need adjusting. I left the brooch on and went to clean the hallway mirror, the one she used to pose in front of before prom. The call came just past noon. I let it ring once before answering. I already knew who it was. Mom Isla's voice was sharp, brittle. Where are the gloves? The veil. The lace runner from Nana's dining set. I took a slow sip of coffee before responding. Sold. A long silence. Then what I sold them, I repeated. Last week. They belonged to me, and I wasn't invited. The breath caught in her throat. I could hear it, the disbelief turning to outrage. You had no right. I had every right, I said, keeping my voice steady. They were entrusted to me, not gifted to you, not promised in writing, and certainly not included in a wedding I was excluded from. You're blowing this out of proportion, she snapped. I'm matching proportion, I corrected, for the first time. She hung up without saying goodbye. An hour later, Grant's name popped up on my screen. I didn't answer. A message followed. You've made this difficult. Isla's devastated. I stared at the words for a while, then typed slowly, deliberately. She'll survive. She always has everything. I didn't expect a reply, and I didn't get one. I stood at the window afterward, watching the street in silence. A neighbor's daughter zipped by on a scooter, pink streamers fluttering from the handlebars. Her mother called out from the porch. Laughter in her voice, warmth in her eyes. The little girl waved and shouted back something I couldn't hear, but I could feel it, that easy rhythm of being wanted, included. I walked back to the hallway mirror and adjusted the silver brooch still pinned above my heart. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It stung, yes, but like lemon on a cut that was finally being cleaned. In the distance, a car door slammed. I turned my head and waited, half expecting Isla to appear on the porch in a fury. But it wasn't her. It was the mailman, and he had a square cream-colored envelope with my name handwritten in ink. The envelope was cream-colored, thick stock, hand-addressed in Isla's script. I didn't open it right away. I already knew what it was. By the time I did, I'd already heard from two people in town, the florist and the vintage photographer. Both had backed out of the wedding. Something about the heirloom angle falling through the florist had said, almost amused. They said it was central to the theme, but without the originals it just felt hollow. The photographer was even blunter. I don't shoot fiction, he told me. It's a styled shoot, not a story. I tucked the envelope under a pile of old utility bills and went about my day. Coffee, laundry, a short walk, peace. But it didn't end there. That Friday, I stopped by a local bakery for scones, and the venue coordinator spotted me near the coffee station. I'd known her in passing for years. We'd once served together on a community board back when Isla was still in high school. Larissa, she said gently, glancing around before leaning in. I thought you should know they tried to use your name. Said the entire wedding concept was a tribute to you. That the heirlooms, the lace, the pearls, it was all part of your legacy. Family elegance, they called it. I stirred cream into my coffee and met her eyes. I revoked it. She blinked, caught off guard. Then she nodded. Well, it shows. I walked out of that bakery with my bag of scones and a sense of something heavier falling away behind me. The narrative they'd tried to build was crumbling, not because I destroyed it, but because it never included truth to begin with. Later that afternoon, I received another text. Are you still coming? We'd like to rebuild. Isla. I stared at it for a long time, then closed my phone and placed it on the counter beside the brooch. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing past the porch, like an old friend who remembered. The wedding day arrived with clear skies and too much noise. I didn't dress up. I didn't do my hair. I brewed my coffee the way I always did, strong, quiet mine, and packed a well-worn novel into my bag. Then I drove to the shore. The beach was almost empty, just how I liked it. A windbreaker flapped on a lone jogger in the distance. The tide was low, leaving streaks of sea foam along the sand. I kicked off my shoes and sat on a bench with a view of the water. After a while, Clara arrived. She didn't ask questions, just sat beside me and opened the paper bag of pastries she always brought when something heavy hung between us. She handed me one without looking. I took it without thanks. We'd never needed that kind of thing. Not going, she finally asked, biting into hers. I took a slow sip of coffee, the steam brushing past my lips. I already gave them everything they wanted, I said. But not everything they assumed they'd get. She nodded, brushing a flake of crust from her lap. That's the part they'll remember. We watched a seagull circle above, then dive and miss. The waves moved in and out, unbothered by dresses and decorations and white chairs, facing flowerless arches. I used to think legacy was what you left behind, I said. Turns out, it's what you choose not to hand over. Clara didn't speak. She just reached over and gave my hand a quick squeeze before letting it go again. The kind of gesture that said, I see you, even if they don't. The sun shifted slightly, casting the bench in warmer light. In the distance, someone shouted with joy or surprise, too far away to know why. I leaned back, opened my book, and let the page flutter. I didn't need an aisle. I had the ocean. The photos went up before the cake was even cut. A carefully curated grid of white roses, beige linens, and forced laughter. Isla's smile looked tight at the edges. Grant's posture a little too perfect. I scrolled without emotion, sipping the last of my morning coffee. And then came the comments. Where's the heirloom veil? Thought you were using your family's vintage pieces. Didn't you say your mom was part of the theme? The questions piled on quickly. Some genuine, some sharp. Isla tried replying once or twice, but it didn't take long before she disabled the comments altogether. I waited. The next day, I saw a comment from Grant's mother. Did your mom not come? That's odd, she'd written beneath a group photo. Polite concern, thinly veiled judgment. The kind of tone that drips from lips at fundraisers and spreads like rumors at brunch tables. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened the small wooden chest in my hallway closet and pulled out the photo Isla had forgotten existed. It was from a different time. Soft, warm, worn around the edges. 3 women in frame, my grandmother, my mother, and me. I placed the photo in a silver frame and set it on my bookshelf beside the lily brooch I'd kept. Let them post their filtered moments. Let them crop the story until it only showed the leaves, not the roots. At dinner, I roasted a small chicken. Nothing fancy, just what I liked. A meal made for one rich with rosemary and memory. The house was still peaceful. No music, no chatter, just the ticking of the old clock in the hallway and the gentle creak of settling wood. Then came the knock. Not urgent, not soft, just there. I stood up slowly, wiped my hands on the apron I never used for company anymore, and walked toward the door. I hadn't meant to find it. I was digging for a spare bulb in the hallway drawer when the envelope caught my eye, yellowed at the corners, addressed in my handwriting. To Isla. Dated the week after her college graduation. I sat down at the kitchen table, heart strangely steady, and opened it. My words spilled out in soft ink. Pride, love, hope. I'd written about her determination, about how I saw her carving a future on her own terms. I told her she made me proud, not just for her accomplishments, but for her heart. I'd folded it carefully back then. Thought I'd give it to her at dinner. But something must have shifted. Maybe the way she waved her phone through the meal. Maybe the way Grant had laughed at my shoes. Whatever it was, I'd tucked the letter away instead. I read it once more, then took it out to the garden and burned it. It curled easily in the ceramic pot ashes, rising into the same air that used to carry lullabies. Later that night, my phone buzzed. It was from Isla. A single photo. The wedding's display table. Meant to showcase generational elegance, as the planner had once called it. But the table was empty. A white cloth, a single flickering candle, and nothing else. No gloves, no veil, no brooch. No story. She hadn't added a caption. Just the photo. I stared at it for a moment, then typed back, "Elegance isn't something you borrow. It's something you carry." No reply came. I didn't expect one. I put the phone down and rinsed out my teacup. The house had settled into its usual hush. Outside, the wind rustled through the garden fence, gentle but firm, like a voice clearing its throat. I turned off the lights and climbed the stairs. The photo of the three of us, my mother, my grandmother and me, catching the moonlight on its frame as I passed. Tomorrow I would bring in the lilies. It was a Thursday morning when she showed up. No knock, just the soft crunch of gravel and the hesitant creak of the gate. I watched from the kitchen window as she stood there, hands in the pockets of her pale trench coat, looking smaller than usual. I opened the door, said nothing, and stepped aside. She came in without a word. We didn't hug. She glanced around like it was unfamiliar territory, though she'd grown up in these rooms. Her eyes landed on the fireplace, then the side table, then finally on me. Or rather, on my chest. The brooch sat quietly on the lapel of my blouse. The silver lily polished and calm, catching just enough light to be noticed. "That was supposed to be mine," she said, her voice thin. I looked at her, not angry, not triumphant, just level. "No," I said. "That was always meant for the woman who remembered where it came from." She didn't answer. I didn't offer coffee. Instead, I motioned gently toward the armchair across from me, the same chair she used to curl up in during high school when she'd read bridal magazines and dream about centerpieces. She sat, and for the next few minutes neither of us spoke. She didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't offer any. But there was a flicker, just a flicker of something I hadn't seen in her since childhood. Not elegance, not pride. Humility. She stared at the fireplace for a long time, as if she was trying to remember the sound it made when we used to light it together on snowed-in Sundays. The house didn't hold its breath. It had heard apologies and silence before. It waited, like me not needing anything. She reached out not to touch the brooch, but to trace the pattern in the coffee table's wood grain. Her fingers moved slowly, like they were reading a language she used to know. She stayed,